besties. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Kyan, and this is Kyan is Booked. We are kicking off my top 10 of insert trope or insert the year here. I'm actually doing a couple of different ones because I've kind of seen some other creators doing like different tropes that they specifically read a lot of this year. And if you can't tell by the title and you can't tell by my shirt, I'm going to be talking about fantasy romance today, which is something that I really found myself diving into in the year 2024. So I read some previously, and I definitely have some series that are near and dear to my heart. But I really felt like this year was my year to like fall into different fantasy worlds. And I had such an amazing time. And I'm really looking forward to a lot of releases in 2025 and then reading some other books that I didn't get the chance to read in 2024. So we're going to run through the ones that I don't own just yet. Not because I'm a hater, just because I haven't bought an edition I really, really like just yet, or just haven't bought an edition whatsoever, right? So the first one is going to be, is it just two? Yeah, it is just two. Okay. So the first one's going to be The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. And I wasn't sure really what to expect by this. For those of you who have been like longtime fans of the series, this is definitely something that people are really excited about. She got new covers for the series this year because I think they were picked up traditionally. But essentially, this girl has been held in this desert with 13 of her other sisters, 12 or 13. And they were all essentially trained to become assassins. And then the goal is that they're going to be sent to the rival kingdom to kill off the prince and or get the secret to the Bridge Kingdom, right? The only issue is you don't necessarily expect how she gets chosen, because I'm not going to go ahead and spoil that one for you. But then also too, like how she ends up betraying, because, and it's not a secret because the second book is literally called The Traitor Queen, which, yes, by the way, I have read it. Immaculate. But I digress. So we don't know, right, just yet how the betrayal is going to come, but like it's very obvious that it is going to become. It isn't something that you were just like, oh, like I can't believe that. It is very clearly going to be the reason why this couple has two books, because you absolutely 100% have to be able to live out the entire arc that the two of them are going to have, right? So you have this prince and he's like, I can't trust her. I know she's going to betray me, but there's just something about her that he literally cannot resist. And it is absolutely his downfall. But their love story, so good. So good. And like the tension and the slow burn and the angst and like the enemies to lovers in the beginning, because they're hardcore enemies, like absolutely hardcore enemies, is just mwah. I was obsessed with it. Okay. Next up, you have Trial of the Sun Queen. And I read this for the first time in 2024, mostly because I knew that the fourth and final book of the series was going to be coming out in 2024. Unfortunately for me, I binged the first three books in July. And if you want any of my like really long drawn out thoughts about the series, I will link the vlogs that go to, because I did vlog over the summer, like reading the series and reading like romantasy in general. But this follows a girl who is thrown into prison, her brother and her sister, by the Aurora King. And the Aurora King holds people there because he can. And he's just like, you know, one of those kings. And this is a story of a girl who has more power than she could possibly imagine. And she is shuttled off or like stolen from the prison and taken to the Sun King's palace because there's a prophecy out there that states that like she's going to be the one who's going to like break the spell or like bring something back. And, you know, we love a good prophecy in a fantasy romance. I love a good prophecy. Like, are you kidding me? Especially when like she's caught between two men. Let's be so for real for a second. But anyways, it's always going to be the Aurora Prince though. And we meet him. And if you're looking for a slow burn on top of a slow burn on top of a torturously slow burn, I highly recommend the series. They definitely start off as enemies, mostly because she doesn't know who she is. He's figuring out who she is. He saves her, but also too, like there's a lot of angst. Like his dad did really horrible things to her, like god awful things to her. And she's like, I just don't know how I'm supposed to like not hold the son responsible for the sins of the father type deal. I will admit here and now though, I own the fourth book. Haven't read it yet. It's like 600, 700 pages, so I was saving it for winter break, but I recommend the series overall. It did end on a cliffhanger in the third book, though, and I was like, all right. Next one up, I just read this in December, and I know you're going to be like, of course you can't stop thinking about it, but okay, this duology took me out, okay? This duology took me out. I tried to read this, was it February or March? But I didn't read it in time, and there's this massive wait at my library, so I think I got this, like the duology as a birthday gift, because I just couldn't read it fast, and like there were like 70 people waiting behind me, and I was like, it's okay, like I'll just get a copy of it at some point, right? Anyways, that's not what you're here for. I don't even know where to begin with this because I read the entire thing and I have so many things I want to talk about because I love the pacing. I absolutely loved the relationship between our two main characters. So you have Elspeth. I didn't say that correctly. I feel like I'm not saying it correctly, but I feel like it's also not fair because, why do I not feel like it's fair? I don't think it's fair either too because it's such a hard name. So like, I feel like it's Elizabeth, but like spelled differently. Anyways, doesn't matter. This centers around a world created, like magic created through trading cards essentially, like, and each of the cards represent something different. Each of the cards, the only way you can have power is if you have a card, right? And she touched a nightmare card when she was young, and there is essentially somebody else's like soul and mind living in her brain, but it's a secret and nobody knows. So she has this, like, she calls him the nightmare, and this nightmare helps her get out of like really sticky situations, has been like essentially living off her life force for a period of time now. But then we find out who the nightmare really is and what card she actually touched. And I just like, it was so good as a duology. Like I really enjoyed how tight the plot was and how like every single thing that happened had a purpose and there's a reason behind it. And I cannot, like, I didn't really start to like be like, okay, like what's gonna happen until about 100 pages in, because you get dropped in and you get dropped in hard and you get dropped in fast, and there's a lot of confusion there. But oh my God, was this book immaculate. And then the duology, I cried at the end of Two Twisted Crowns, which is the second book, right? I cried at the end of it because I was just so invested in this relationship, not just the relationship between Raven and Elizabeth, but like the relationship between her and the nightmare. Because when you get the truth and like when all the secrets come out, you're like gobsmacked almost. And it's just so good. And I'm gonna set this down because I could spend this whole time talking about it. And like, I have just so many other stories that also deserve as much praise. Next up, you have Vicious Bonds by Shanora Williams. So this is book 1 in the Tethered trilogy. And this follows Kaz and Willow. And this is a really interesting concept because it's like, it's world traveling, but also time traveling as well. So like, Willow lives on Earth, but she time travels to a period in time where like you still have people who like live in manors, and it's a town of Blackwater, and you have somebody who's like responsible for that town. And you know, it's back, I say it back in the day, but like it's from a different time, right? But the problem is their souls are tethered and they are meant to be together, but there's so much more that has to happen in between all of it, right? And it's enemies to lovers, deliciousness. I was obsessed with Kaz. He gives everything that you want, like in that romantasy hero and more. I loved him. I loved the characters overall. I just loved, like, once they became the couple that I wanted them to become, like there wasn't anything that Kaz wasn't going to do for Willow. And I was obsessed with him because of that. And their relationship is so beautiful. And just like the simple fact of, it's a hard road to get to where they needed to be, but in the end, like the beauty of their relationship was just, it was so good. It's a 3-book series, it's a trilogy, and it is complete for your reading pleasure. And if you love enemies to lovers, if you love time travel, if you love Fated Mates, I'm gonna toss Fated Mates out there. I don't necessarily know if she like advertised it as Fated Mates, but it feels Fated Mates, and then when you read it, you'll understand why. But it was like such an intricate magic system. And like I said, like the relationship between Kaz and Willow is just Chef's kiss. Next up, and I haven't taken the wrapping off of this. Who do I think I am? Anyways, this is A Kingdom of Stars and Shadows by Holly Renee. And all I can say is brothers, well, I guess they're stepbrothers, right? So stepbrothers, fiance, slight enemies to lovers, maybe fated mates, rival kingdoms. I read this book in one sitting on the floor of the Miami airport when my flight was delayed. And I am absolutely 115%, we're going to open this together, 115% obsessed with this series. And I loved every minute of, because I cannot remember their names, loved every minute of this series. And just like the forbidden aspect of this. Ooh, this is so pretty. It's really crazy too, because I haven't like actually looked on the inside of this. But like the forbidden aspect of it was just so, I don't know, I was very, very much obsessed with it. But essentially it starts off with like her being star blessed, and essentially when you're star blessed, like you have the power to save the kingdom, and she is believed to have the power to save the kingdom. But the problem is she's obsessed with the wrong brother, and she's not obsessed, like she's obsessed with the enforcer, which, girl, I get it. But she's supposed to marry the one who's supposed to become the king, right? So then it becomes like he's trying to save her from all these pitfalls. The man she's supposed to marry is like absolute garbage, but you know, he's the king, he needs her magic, etc., etc. But she feels herself falling for the one that she's not supposed to fall for. So, too good. The back says, "You are their savior, but my demise. You are to ruin every part of me." I definitely highlighted that quote when I was reading it. Next up, you have The Longing of Lone Wolves by Lana Petracek, and this is book 1 in the Fae Guardian series. And I really do believe this is still my favorite one, even though I loved the vampires. But anytime I get to read about wolf shifters is a good time to me. So this follows Thea. No. This is Clark. Why did I think it was Thea? Thea's later on. So Clark and what do you call it? Rush. So he hasn't been able to like see or touch any other human for 100 years because he had he broke some rules, and so his punishment was that he was no longer considered part of the Guardians. He had to leave his son. He became like essentially like invisible to everybody around them. But then the problem is Clark wakes up, and it's 1,000 years into the future. The human world doesn't exist anymore. And she is considered to be like one of the saviors that is going to come and is going to help save like their world because the magic is killing the world, right? So she can see Rush. Nobody else can. So he's immediately like drawn to her because he's like, it's been so long since anybody has like acknowledged me or looked at me. And the way that Lana wrote this is the first 3 books are wolf shifters. The next 3 are vampires. And then the 3 after that are the crow shifters. I feel like I'm missing shifters. I don't know. Anyways, so it's the Fae Guardians. There's only 12 Guardians at a time. And each of the Guardians begins to pair off with a human that wakes up after the old world is destroyed. So, you know, these humans are trying to trying to acclimate to a new world. 1,000 years later, they've been like frozen in stasis essentially, and they're considered to be like the saviors of this world, which is a huge undertaking. I love Clark and Rush, definitely one of my favorite couples. Thor's his son, that's what it is. Okay, I feel so much better now. Anyways, I definitely recommend picking it up. There's audiobooks. Are they on Kindle Unlimited? I believe they're on Kindle Unlimited. Yes, they are on Kindle Unlimited. But I listened to the audiobooks and had an amazing time. Next up, I have A Kiss of Iron by Claire Sager. And I read this over the summer as well. And this follows Bastion and this follows Kat. And she turns into a thief to save her estate because her husband's essentially a deadbeat, and goes and gambles off all the money. And then it falls to her to take care of the estate, even though she's a female in a time where like females aren't given respect and like can't own land and like have to have a man to like essentially do everything for them, right? So this is enemies to lovers. This is like she's called into court and she doesn't fit like the model that like women are supposed to fit. Like she's a little bit plus size, and so she's a thicker woman than most men are accustomed to. And you know, everybody knows that she's married, but like everybody knows her husband's a deadbeat too, right? So then in enters Bastion. He's from like essentially another realm, and they start to feel that attraction to each other, and they start to feel like that bond building up. But the problem is like he can't let himself care for anybody because he works for the Night Queen, and the Night Queen probably wouldn't love if her enforcer, or the person that like she like allows to hold her kingdom in his hands, what, you know, she wouldn't want to give up control of him, right? So it's this, oh god, it's so good, and there are so many like really amazing moments between the two of them. And Bastion is like, there is not anything that he wouldn't do for her. And the third and final book is actually coming out on the 31st of December, so it is about to be a finished series, and it's a trilogy. So next up, you have Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. And this is going to be a 4-book series. I know the 4th book is on hold, like the release date's on hold indefinitely because she's working on the final book. But this follows Diem and Luther. And she essentially, like, her mom runs away, and she's been kind of rebelling and isn't quite sure where she all fits in, but she works with the healers, and she goes to the castle at a certain point, meets Luther, saves the princess because she's able to like heal her, and starts to rebel by not taking the medication or the tonic that her mom has made for her, and starts to realize that maybe there's more to all of this than she thought there was. Maybe she actually has magic because she's been taking that tonic and the tonic's been suppressing it. But then enters Luther, who is being groomed to be the next king, because guess what? The king's also dying. And because the king's dying, she takes over his care because her mom was responsible for caring for the king, because the magic can't save him at this point, and he has to essentially like die off like a human, so they were making him comfortable essentially. I really like Luther, and I like what just he's one of those guys who like keeps everything really close to the vest, but then there's not anything that like he won't do for her, and so he's like he's willing to do whatever. And I just love him so much. I am gonna confess, I've only read the first 2 books. I really enjoy it though. I just Heat of the Everflame's like 1,000 pages. Is anything that serious? But anyways, I really enjoyed this series. There is a really fun twist at the end of this book, but also at the end of the 2nd book. So I am interested to see, once I read the 3rd book and the 4th book, kind of like what direction Penn Cole goes, because there's a couple of different ways with how she left the 2nd book. But I definitely recommend picking this up. Next up, you have When the Moon Hatched, and I have the really pretty Fairy Loot edition. Is this Fairy Loot? Yeah, this is Fairy Loot edition. And where do I start with this? Because I feel like so many people love this book, and there's so much being said about it. But for me, I loved the second chance aspect between these 2 characters. Now, it took us a little bit of time to get to the fact that this was a second chance romance, and that they knew each other from like what felt like a lifetime ago, because our main character has undergone so much trauma and has undergone so much that prevents her from like wanting to remember anything in her past, and prevents her for like wanting anything outside of fighting for the rebellion, because like wanting too much more is gonna be like the end of her essentially. And I'm not even gonna lie to you, there's a story in here about her dragon, and I sobbed during that story about her dragon. But anyways, let's keep talking about this. I think too, what's really beautiful about the relationship between her and her male main character is the fact that he recognizes her almost immediately, or like recognizes the essence and the spirit of her almost immediately. And then once he finally places her, he realizes like he's been like given a second chance and like another opportunity to see if they can do things differently, but he's going to be going up against like her own fears, and her fears are definitely founded in the sense that like she can't have attachment. She's scared to like, when you find out how they're controlling her, it is heartbreaking. Like, I was crying when I found all of that out, right? So it is just a beautiful story of like an opportunity for this couple to have that second chance and to like be together, and a story of dragons. And it was so good. And I'm fearful for the next book because I'm left in a place right now where, okay, I get it, but like what happens in the next one? But it was so good, and it was so beautiful, and it was just not at all what I was expecting from like a dragon romance. But I don't know. Like the way he loves her is just so beautiful. And I'm gonna set it down. Okay, if you've been on my channel for like any length of time, I've probably talked about this book, and here I am talking about it again. So I was going to pick the third book in the series, but I want to highlight the series overall. So this is Blood and Steel. It's the first book in Helen Schuer's Legends of Thesmar series. And this follows Thea, and she is an alchemist. So they're essentially like the healers of the time. And hang on a second. Okay. So this follows, her name's Althea, but I call her Thea because that's what everybody else in the series calls her. And she's an alchemist, which essentially is like the healers of the time, right? And there's a prophecy that came out so like women can no longer be warriors, right? So there are war stones, and they are the like top like god tier essentially warriors of this time. And there's only 3 left because the pool for that type of warrior is getting smaller and smaller, right? Because there's this whole great rite you have to go through, and this like crazy trial, and you have to be like top tier, right? She's always dreamed of being one. And she meets Wilder, and Wilder Hawthorne is one of those war swords. And him and his 2 friends come back to where they are, and essentially they're going to be the ones who are going to train the new warriors, right? And she somehow gets permission from the council and the king to enter into the arena to become one of these like really, really great warriors. There's not anything I wouldn't do for this man. If Wilder Hawthorne has no fans, he has me, okay? And I will go to the bat for this man because he's gruff, and he holds everything close to the vest, and he pushes everything away that could potentially matter, and he fights beautifully, and there's not anything he wouldn't do for the people that he cares about. And he believes so strongly in his vows and who he is as a person. And he is stubborn, and he is grumpy, but he is tragically in love with Thea, and there's not anything that this man would not do for her. And it is beautiful. And Thea by turn is trying to convince herself that she doesn't need to feel attracted to him because she's trying to prove that women can also be good warriors, and to prove that the prophecy isn't correct. And she is racing against the clock, but it doesn't matter because she feels like this is a person that she's supposed to spend the rest of her life with, and the person that she's in love with. And it's a slow burn, and it's delicious. And even when you feel like he's not helping her, he's helping her. And it's not, I don't think it's on the back of this one. I actually have 2 special editions of this one, but there is a quote. Ooh, I wonder if it's on the reverse dust jacket. There's a quote, and I really wish I had written it down. It's not. And it talks about how like she's absolutely beautiful, but she would probably be even more beautiful with the blood of her enemies on her. And I was just like, sir. So if you haven't had a chance to pick this series up, I highly recommend it. I don't know, like I am going to be shouting about the series for forever. The more I talk about it, the more I just want to like get all the audiobooks and obsessively re-listen to it, because there is no man like Wilder Hawthorne. And oh my gosh, I love Thea. I love the 2 of them together. And I love how like they butt heads, but like there's nothing either of them wouldn't do for each other. It's just too good. So that, friends, those are my 10 favorite fantasy romances of the year. And I definitely showcased a lot of the first books in the series because I didn't want to talk like spoilers about later books. And if we're being honest, like if the first book doesn't hook me, like I'm not reading the rest of them anyways. So if you haven't read The Legends of Thesmar, Blood and Steel. I highly recommend it. In fact, I recommend every book in this video, but definitely Legends of Thesmar. Let me know if we have any of the same favorites, or if you see books on my list that you've been dying to read, because I love hearing about people's TBRs and the list that they want to do. And as always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe and comment, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.